This channel is made possible through the support of generous listeners just like you. If you would like to be a part of helping us bring our message of hope, peace, love, and spiritual truth to the world, please consider heading to experienceofthesoul.com/support, where you can join us as an ongoing patron or simply make a one-time gift. Blessings on the journey, dear friend.
Natural Awakenings Magazine, Zen Living Realty, and Supportek Staffing present The Authentic Spiritual Journey, a weekly show featuring real and practical spiritual conversations from diverse perspectives here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Today, episode 118, Todd and Cathy Adams of Zen Parenting Radio. And now your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson.
Hello and welcome to The Authentic Spiritual Journey. My name is Cynthia Alice Anderson. I am the host, and I'm here in 818 Studios with my producer.
Hello, everybody. This is Dave Croft. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 118 of The Authentic Spiritual Journey. I hope that as we're coming up to the end of September, I hope that you've had a great September and everybody's safe, healthy, with masks on, and all of that.
And also taking your vitamin D. Okay, but anyway, we're glad you're here. We're glad you're a part of the show. And, we want to thank our listeners for from all around the world. I mean, the fact that we're over 70 countries now, and I can't tell you what it means to us to know that our message is making an impact. And so today we have some incredible guests on, Cathy and Todd from Zen Parenting Radio. Woo!
Welcome.
So, yeah. So, if you don't know about them, I tell you, by the end of the show, you're going to be checking out their podcast, and they do a lot of great work on Zen Parenting Radio. And not only am I a listener, I've recommended their show to many people on the spiritual journey, and we know that the parents out there, the aunts, the uncles that are trying to be good role models, that are wanting what's best for their kids, are always looking for ways to grow, to expand, to know themselves, right? So that they can be good models for those kids, those grandkids, those nieces and nephews. So we have Cathy and Todd with us today. So welcome to the show. And I want you guys to start out right away just telling us a little bit about your show, since so many of our listeners may not have heard of it yet.
You start.
Okay. Well, our show, we've been doing it for almost a decade. We're like coming up on 10 years here. So we kind of have been in podcasting before people knew what podcasting was. And we started the show. I had written a book about 10 years ago and had gone on somebody's show, and they said, you should talk about these things. The book was called The Self-Aware Parent. You should discuss these things on, your own show. And they said, but definitely bring in a partner or someone to talk with so you can have interaction. And in that moment, I said, okay, my husband will do it with me, before I even asked him if he would do it with me.
She didn't even ask me.
I just said, because he and I have these talks all the time. And although we have changed a lot in the last 10 years, our initial tagline was a spiritual and emotional mom and a practical and logical dad discuss parenting, which is still true in some ways. That's not completely not the case, but we've definitely grown over a decade, going from our 30s to our 40s.
Yes.
And so basically our show is ever evolving. We never run out of things to discuss, as most parents know. But the real grounding element is self-awareness, or I should say elements, are self-awareness, mindfulness, compassion, and connection with our families.
Yeah. And I guess I'll just add what we open with on every single podcast is a motto that we learned from Dr. Daniel Siegel, who written a whole bunch of books that many of your listeners are probably familiar with. But the tagline is this: the best predictor of a child's well-being is a parent's self-understanding. So for us, that's kind of the foundation of some of the things that we like to talk about.
Oh, it is absolutely true. It is absolutely true. And actually, that's one of my favorite things you say on the show. That, and the fact that you know some of the same people I do, is the exact reason you're here. Because what our show is all about is the evolving soul. We help people grow, prosper, and evolve. And that's what all the aspects of my ministry are. So, and one of the things I often say is, to our parents is, the one who benefits from your self-work the most is your child, right? That's the one that benefits from your self-work the most. And so, because I sometimes have people ask, you're always working on yourself. And I say, yes, and it's worth it. Because what's so amazing as I watch my son's journey, he's 13 now, he started where I was. And I worked very hard before he came along, right, to heal at the very core of my being and continue to. So I know it's an important part of what you do, and that's exactly why I wanted you on the show. I want people to hear from another voice how the key is self-awareness, is understanding, there's compassion, there's connection, all the things you talk about. So, I'm curious on your journey, because I know you must give out a lot of energy to a lot of parents, and I'd be curious to know what really supports you as a parent. Like, where do you get your support? I mean, I'm sure you support each other, and like, what kind of work do you do on yourself to get the support you need to then give out so much to so many people?
How about I answer for you and you answer for me?
Well, okay. We'll give that a shot.
She's got a bunch of books. She's a reading maniac. And it's not just reading, it's practicing what it is. Anybody could read a bunch of books. The practicing is the part that I am really inspired by in regards to Cathy. So that's the first thing I thought of when Cynthia asked that question.
Yeah. And I will, and this is what I'll do. I'll kind of enhance that, and then I'm going to talk about you.
Fine.
So I agree with Todd. I have been reading, I guess what you'd call personal growth or self-help since I was in my late teens. And I like what Todd just said, because I did not used to practice. I used to read it and it would make me feel good. And then I'd be like telling everybody else about what I read. That version of self-help and personal growth where you tell everybody else what you know.
Yeah.
And what I learned in my 20s, but also going into parenthood and beyond, and like you said, it continues, is that personal growth is not an academic or head-based experience.
Right.
It's literally you have to apply what you're learning. You have to practice what you're learning. And the best practice, or what I think the only transformational practice, is with other people, relationship type practice. How does that show up in your marriage? How does that show up in your partnership? How does that show up with your children or your coworkers? We can say we're mindful or that we're kind, but is that really what we're demonstrating to the world? So that's a big part of it. Obviously, self-care is a big, word. We could do a whole show about it, but it really is just monitoring all of those, self-compassion in itself is, it's noticing when you need to support yourself and validate yourself and accept who you are, and also recognizing when you need to motivate yourself. So it's like both sides. Self-compassion for me entails, basically paying attention to what I'm feeling and what I'm putting out in the world. So that's the big one for me, even though I know that sounds general. There's, everybody has a different way of taking care of themselves. For some, it's exercise. For some, it's reading. For some, it's, just a mindful everyday experience. So I try not to give people who listen to our show, this is how you do it, because I think there's so many different ways. And what I'll say about Todd is part of the reason that I always liked Todd from the beginning, like even before we started dating or got married, was he is super, super playful, and he's very young at heart, and he loves sports and games. Like our trunk, or now we have minivans, are like full of like Frisbees and, gloves for baseball. And he, like, wherever we go, Todd wants to play. And I feel like for him, that is movement and play is self-care, where for me, it's quiet and stillness.
Right.
And so he finds a way to, decrease his anxiety and recognize his own potential through play.
And I guess I'll just add to what Cathy said real quick. That Cathy talked about practice. And it's funny, I kind of feel like there's, putting into practice some of the things that you learn. And I feel like the lowest hanging fruit, the easiest things to practice are things where there is no person you can blame. So in other words, let's say you want to go outside and play and it's raining. Like there's nobody that caused that, or somebody, like some unknown person cuts you off on the road while you're driving. Like that's an opportunity to practice like love and compassion and emotional intelligence. And then if you can get that, then all of a sudden you can spend some time like a coworker who is, for whatever reason, making you reactive. And then if you really want to take a deep dive into see how self-aware you can be in a certain moment, is to go back and live with your parents or do some type of childhood experience.
Right. That's a great Ram Dass quote. Yeah, that's what he says.
It is. Go home and live with your parents.
Yeah, he says if you think you're enlightened, go home and spend a week with your parents. Yeah,
absolutely.
So start with the easiest stuff, which is, hey, I want it to be sunny out and it's raining. So check in with yourself and what's going on, and then work your way towards, the really potentially activating things. So.
I think that's beautiful, and I think you guys, both of you, said so many beautiful things there. One of which I want to just lift up a little bit and spend a little time with, which we talk a lot about this too, is our emotional awareness. And I just was kind of sent some writings out to my email list and my congregation about this very thing, that, what I'm seeing culturally is anger is so activated right now. And what I know about anger is that, not to, go into all of that, but if we can observe our anger rather than just be constantly in anger, then we can really make good, grounded, spiritually guided, decisions. But when we're in anger and we're constantly operating out of anger, it's like the most simple aspect, of the brain, that reptilian brain, is where that anger comes from, and it's really based in fear. And so our desire is to really be in observance of that, like get this, like we often call it like this mountaintop view, where we're observing the feelings, and yes, of course, we're feeling them and we're aware of them in the body, but then we're also saying, well, what is mine to do, and even what is mine to heal? Because very often, right, when that anger gets tripped up, or like you're saying, we're very activated in some way, or as a friend of mine says it this way, I got very elevated, and I think that's a great word, because all of a sudden, everything is like really elevated. And we want to look at that and kind of say, okay, what is happening? And I think as parents, wow, if we can do that, the whole energy in our home is one of peace, it's one of love, it's one of connection. But when we're in that reaction mode, watch out. Nobody's happy, nobody's feeling connected, right? So I would just want to lift up a little bit about that and have you guys talk a little bit more about emotional awareness and how you work with that.
Yeah, I love talking about anger because I think sometimes anger gets a really bad rap, which is, kind of interesting to say in a time where, like you said, where there is so much divisiveness, and it's so, we are feeling so much intense anger. But when we really look at that emotion, anger tells us about our own boundaries.
It does.
It just is like it's speaking to us, telling that intense reaction we feel is some line has been crossed.
Yes.
That we feel is our whole body and soul is pushing back and saying, this doesn't feel right. And so if we learn, it's unfortunate because when we're young, again, from well-intended parents and adults that raised us, we are often told that anger is bad, especially girls. If you're feeling angry, be nice. There's something wrong. And unfortunately, with boys, sometimes it can be, and again, I'm speaking very generally. I don't like to make absolutes, but with boys, sometimes it's coddled in a way where then violence becomes a norm with anger that we accept. So it's this binary where, with girls, we don't accept it. With boys, we accept it too much. But that in-between place is understanding that anger is just one of the feelings that tells us about ourselves and what to do next. And I love what you just said about standing back from it. The problem we have is the reaction instead of response. So response is that space between where we're like, oh, I'm feeling angry. What is this? What's the line that has been crossed? And then choosing how to respond. Reaction is like what you said, the reptilian part where we just get mad and then we retaliate in whatever way. And I also just want to comment on what you said with the parenting part, because it can tell us so much about our own self-awareness, like what you said about old wounds or, ourselves, because if something, I'll give a very generic thing that parents say all the time. Like, I have to tell my kids to put away their shoes, and I have to ask them every day. And I can't believe I have to ask them, and they get angry at their kids and they yell at their kids. And I always ask them to look for the deeper part of that. Like, what is it that your anger is telling you?
Right.
Is it something that you've been taught that the house has to be really tidy and that they're not respecting that? Or is it something deeper that you don't feel heard either right now at work or from your parents when you were young, or that you feel like you're failing parenting. There's always some story in there that anger can help us see it rather than run away from the anger that we're feeling. So totally, as I said, I think anger can be, one of those really useful emotions.
Yeah. And I guess just to reinforce what Cathy just said, what you said, Cynthia, is if you can observe your anger, like there's a mountain of work and exploration and intuition in that one sentence. Like if we could manage our emotions instead of being lost by them. Oh, yes. And that's why people pray. That's why people meditate. That's why people do yoga. And it's not about meditation, prayer, and yoga. It's, do you have the ability to take it off the mat, out of the church? And that is a muscle that needs to be worked. And that's what meditation does for me, is like, okay, I just do 10 minutes a morning, and that's all I do. Now, how good am I at getting reactive when I'm doing this interview with you right now? My kids keep texting me when I told them not to.
Me too.
Like, let's just check in with ourselves.
Our phones are buzzing like crazy. We're like, stop.
So that even that is an opportunity for me to learn about myself, and me, instead of me getting pissed at them, be like, what's going on with me right now? So anyways.
No, I think those are all really good points. Yeah. Do you need to check that? One of you go ahead.
No. They're completely fine. It's just questions that they're asking.
Well, one of the ways I talk about emotions spiritually is that emotions are windows into the soul, right? Mm-hmm. And so, yes, I love what you're saying about anger, because, and I see it very much in spiritual circles, and certainly in the kind that I find myself, because we're so positive, and some of us are aggressively positive, that when we have a feeling that we think is like not good or not spiritual, we tend to either shove it down or just pretend it isn't there. And that actually does a lot of damage too, because then it comes out sideways. It's why we flare up on the freeway at somebody we don't know. It's why if there are shoes on the floor, we flip out over nothing. We go, where did that come from? That's not me. But in fact, it's because energy, all these emotions and all anger, all the emotions, they have a real specific energy and a real specific vibration, and they will have their day. So even though at the beginning we feel like, well, we're holding it back, it's very different to stuff it than it is to be in observance of it. Because, what I've found in the thousands of people I've worked with over the years is, as they become more and more emotionally aware, that as we can sit with it, as we can just breathe into it, as we can become like conscious observers of what we're doing emotionally, then it's like, suddenly it starts to dissipate. Like we just breathe it through. And rather than the emotion running us, it's like, well, we have choices to make. Like you said, what is this emotion here to tell me? And it is a day by day. And as you said, Todd, moment by moment situations, moment by moment growth. It's not like, oh yes, I'm going to master my emotions, which is what we always want spiritually. But it is a moment by moment, checking in, doing the best we can, and being really honest and integrous with where we are. Yeah.
Exactly. One of the things, talking about emotions and emotional, regulation, or just emotional appreciation, for lack of a better way to say it, is, as parents, that's something that we can start so early with our kids. Is, a lot of us grew up with really hearing that there were good or bad emotions. Reiterating what you're saying, that we really labeled them or put them in a category of, these are bad ones you don't want to have, and these are good ones you do want to have. And that's what really leads to that stuffing that you're referring to, where we just don't feel worthy, or we don't feel like we belong, or we feel like we're going to be rejected, or that we're doing it wrong. There's something inherently wrong with us if we feel anger or pain. And it really leads to that, you were just discussing this, but Todd and I we've had a bunch of shows lately about spiritual bypassing, about I didn't hear that desire to just to say everything's love and light, and we don't need to worry about this because it'll get figured out because love wins. All of those things I believe in, love and light, and I believe love wins, but there is also an understanding that dark and light they exist together. You can't have one without the other, and that we have to be thoughtful about, we can't just pretend those things away. We have to notice what's happening. We have to recognize our emotions. We have to appreciate what they're there to show us. And so as parents with our kids, just starting out by saying there's no bad emotion. Emotions are all there for us to help us, to support us, to tell us about ourselves. All those things we started off this conversation about. And if we can do that, our children can grow up with a sense of that anything they feel has purpose and that they can work through it and that they are better for it and stronger for it.
So what I'm appreciating about this conversation is we've been talking for about 20 minutes and we haven't really talked about our kids. And what I mean by that is to be a good parent. And good is a tough word. Like to be a whole parent, it's got nothing to do with your kids. Like we're just talking about ourselves, and that could be misconstrued as selfish
or blame.
It's just this parenting. We've been doing the podcast for so long, and these parents, bless their heart, they're doing the best they can. But they ask, "How do I get my kid off of screen time?" And I'd be like, check in with yourself. What's going on inside of you? But they feel like they're these little people that you help co-create are little problems that need to be fixed, and you ignore all of your own stuff. So anyways.
No, I so appreciate you saying that. And actually, I want to do more about that when we come back from our break. So we are going to have a brief message from a few of our sponsors.
We'll return to the program in just a few moments, but first, we wanted to give a special word of thanks to our podcast partner, Natural Awakenings Magazine of Central Florida, Greater Orlando. Each month, Natural Awakenings magazines across the country take a practical look at the latest natural approaches to nutrition, fitness, creative expression, personal growth, and sustainable living. Natural Awakenings magazine is a free publication and is available in selected stores, health and education centers, healing centers, public libraries, and wherever free publications are located. You could learn more, including advertising opportunities for your business, by calling 407-628-0705. We'd also like to give a special thanks to Zen Living Realty. Zen Living Realty's mission is to mindfully serve, connect, and positively impact their customers, partners, and community through their Zen approach to real estate. Their vision is to be the most trusted real estate brokerage in the Central Florida area. You can reach Zen Living Realty at zenlivingrealty.com or by calling 407-800-2717. And finally, we'd also like to give a special thanks to Supportek Staffing. Supportek Staffing is an innovative staffing agency built on the principle of caring about their employers and employees as they navigate these new workforce and workplace challenges. If you're an employer, they want to be your human resources partner and help with the changes needed during the pandemic. If you're a candidate, they want to become your lifelong career agent to help you grow into your fullest potential. Supportek prioritizes support over volume, integrity over profits, and will treat your business and your career as if it was their own. You can learn more at supportekstaffing.com. That's SUPPORTEK staffing.com. And now we return you to this week's episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey with your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson.
Welcome back. We're glad you're with us. And I know so many of you tell me you listen to the show when you're in the car or cooking dinner. And I hope you're really thinking, I want you to stir all that love into that dinner and all that understanding, all that compassion as you do that, because we have Cathy and Todd with us from Zen Parenting Radio. And I love their show, and they do so much good work in helping us become more conscious beings. And as you know, if you're a regular listener, you know that's what we're all about, becoming more conscious beings. And we know conscious parents make conscious kids. And so, Todd, I want to go back to something you said, though, right before the break. Do you remember? Because it was so good. I wanted to lead into something from it. Do you remember exactly what you said?
Parenting has nothing to do with your kids.
Yeah. Yeah. So, a couple things I thought about, and I didn't want to try to say it quickly, was that what I think about everything we've talked about emotional awareness, about compassion, understanding, and becoming more conscious, is that really what we're doing as parents is trying to create a container for emotional safety. And I see so much with parents and kids. I see such a disconnect. And I even had somebody who loves me and loves my son very much, very well-meaning, saying, well, at some point they're going to break away from you. And I said, we'll see. We'll see. I said, because he's going to have his moments. Yes. He's going to have his individuation. Just because we're connected doesn't mean we're enmeshed. And I think some people, when they're listening to these old tapes that we've kind of been talking about what it means to be a kid and to raise a kid, that what you guys are talking about, some of the stuff we talk about, it's a whole new way. And we don't have a lot of models for it yet. So we're still, I think, even developing a language around it, But what I know is that if there's something in my son's life he needs help with, I know I'm who he comes to. I know because he tells me. I know because of the experiences we find ourselves in when he looks to me for support, or when he says, I really want to talk to you about something. He knows everything is put down and he has my full attention. And so I think that's so important as parents to realize that we're creating this container for emotional safety, number one, and that if we want our kids to let's say, quote unquote, do the right thing, like you were saying about screen time, they're only doing what we're doing. They're only a mirror for us. And so it's so important to realize what you're saying. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit, because I thought the things you guys were saying were so good.
Well, I love how you started by talking about emotional safety, because something that I love to, share with parents or kind of challenge them a little bit is how focused we are on our children's physical safety, and how, as far as car seats and what they eat and, what they're being able to watch a rated R movie, or, all these things, we're so focused on it, and we forget, or at least we're not paying as much attention to their emotional safety as far as what makes them feel safe. And I don't mean safe like putting a lock on the door. I mean safe in about who they are, inherently who they are. And that having a connection with our kids, like, it's interesting because I think it's all about maybe finding new ways to explain these words. Because when somebody said to you, your child's going to break away from you, in some ways they're 100% supposed to. We're raising children to go out into the world. But what that person means by breakaway is they're going to somehow like be angry with you or need to completely not talk to you. And that doesn't need to happen.
No.
When we had children, it's kind of that roots and wings thing, that idea that we understood, and we didn't do it perfectly all the time, nor do we right now. We're doing our best and practicing, but we understood that it's our work these children came into the world. It's our work to help and support and nurture them in becoming who they are, and then to set them free. And so will they break away? I hope so, because that's the set them free thing.
Right.
But at the same time, staying connected is everything you said before, which is about, but we're still here. The relationship we created never goes away.
Right.
The connection that they feel never fades. And just to even add to what you said about your son coming to you, because we feel the same way about, we want to be that first line of defense for our kids if they're struggling, if they're feeling afraid. A lot of parents, when I do presentations, I'll say, how many of you want your kids to be afraid of you? And there's still a big portion of parents who raise their hand and say, I want them to be afraid of me, because either that's what they grew up with, or that's what they think will alter their child's behavior or keep them safe. But if your child is afraid of you, they will not come to you when they're stressed.
They won't.
Or when they feel like they'll be judged, or when they feel like they've made a misstep. And what child hasn't made a misstep? Many of them. I misstep, and I'm 49 years old. I've been through this 80,000 times.
Right.
So the goal is, not only do we want our kids to come to us, but we have introduced them through our family and through our friends to other adults, saying, if there's something that you want to go to this person, go to your cousin. And we don't even have to introduce it. They know these people, but we say, you can. These are like, go to the adults who love and care for you, knowing that we are here, but so are all these other people, like even your spiritual community, the people who love you, and giving them permission to speak what challenges them, rather than making them pretend that they're okay all the time. This is such that in itself is freedom. I'm a therapist by trade. That's what I went to school for. And sometimes people say, why does therapy work? Like, what does therapy do? Someone's just telling you what's going on. And that's how therapy works.
That's kind of like,
Exactly. And I'm like, I nod along. And if you haven't done it or been a therapist or, done what you do, where you're hearing everybody's, inner thoughts, and you don't understand how powerful it can be. And if we can, as parents, we don't have to be our children's therapists, but if we can be people who listen and respect what our children have to say in a non-judgmental, loving, compassionate way, it's going to be unbelievable how far that goes. But we don't trust it, do we? We just don't trust it.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And, we've gone the gamut of like really big things. And I was glad you talked about 2 supportive people. I was thinking that, and then you said it, and we've been so fortunate because my son's been part of a spiritual community his whole life. There are so many people around him that love him and, really support him unconditionally. But then there were those real special people that are real close in, and he knows who those are and who those are not. And it's so empowering for him to know there's like a whole little village we've created. And even though some of those people aren't close, he even knows he can call like his godfather. He knows if he needed anything, he is one call away, one text away, or whatever. And I think that is so important for him to have, that level of support. What I started to say though is I wanted to go to kind of some kind of like, how it is, it's the little things. And when you were talking earlier about like picking up the shoes or whatever, my son and I started getting into this thing, and we were in a lot of transition. We were trying to get the house ready to sell. And so there was a lot going on. And suddenly I started feeling like I was nagging, and I was like, okay, I don't like myself in this. And here I am. And I said, sweetheart, I would like to talk to you. I said, I am not liking myself right now. It's like so simple. I do not like myself right now, how I am being. And I said, so I just want to talk to you about kind of what is the dynamic I see. And then I want to know what you see. And he was like, okay. And so I told him what was happening. And I said, you have like jobs that you do every day. And I said, and you know what those jobs are? Yes, I know what those jobs are. I said, so tell me what you think the jobs are. We talked through it. And I said, so how can I help you remember what the jobs are without sounding like a naggy mama? Because this doesn't feel good to me. And I don't think it could possibly feel good to you. So what would work? Like, do we write it down? What do we do? Do I go, woo, time to do chores? Or do you say, what's mine to do? What do we do? And he goes, I'm going to think about that. And I said, well, get back to me later today. Give it some thought. He said, if we could just write it down. And I said, well, you know what? There's a big marker over there and there's a big chalkboard. Why don't you write them down in your own handwriting? I'll make sure you get them all. And then every day you can check them off. I said, and then I won't ask you at all. And we'll see how that goes. And I'm telling you, it was like a whole new world in our house. I was not nagging. I was not frustrated. He did not feel bad that he didn't do it and all that. And it was just from talking to him the way I would want to be talked to. It was so simple. It wasn't controlling. It wasn't beating him up. It wasn't nagging him. It's like, if I'm not feeling good in this, how could he possibly be feeling good in this?
And you led with vulnerability. You said, I don't like myself right now, or I don't like my energy right now.
Right.
And bless my mom and my dad, but my God, I don't remember my parents showing any of that vulnerability. And you were not like, Cathy sometimes talks about role to role versus soul to soul.
Oh.
And role to role is, here's the parent, here's the kid. The parent has more wisdom and advice, and their job is just to bestow all this wisdom. And soul to soul is, these are 2 human beings,
right?
Whether or not the kid's 13 or 33, like, how do you want to like communicate with this person? But we've all seen it, whether with Target or Walmart or Six Flags, and you see these parents just screaming at their kids. Like, how in the world do you think that that's going to work?
Well, and the part about the screaming that's rough, and this is, parents always get a laugh out of this, is how we yell at our kids to be kind people. Be nice. And, we're yelling at them in a way that's demonstrating unkindness, non-kindness. What's the word? Just not kindness. And,
right.
But we're telling them to be kind. It's beyond paradoxical. It's contradictory. It's not, we're not really demonstrating what we're asking for. And so, and again, a lot of this just goes back to, I always say with our own upbringing, it's not about throwing our parents under the bus and saying it was all for nothing and it was horrible. It's about recognizing the good we got and why it helped and how it helped and what we want to continue and pass on, if it be traditions or culture or a certain way that we felt loved. And then also acknowledging the pieces that weren't helpful in our childhood, that we can evolve, that we can say, hey, no one really, just saying to a parent, be the person you didn't have when you were a kid. Like, just how can we notice what we didn't get as a child and evolve that in our own parenting, and recognizing at the same time, our children, Todd and I have 3 daughters, our children will evolve what we did. We don't need to repeat the identical patterns of our past.
Right.
We can evolve our, awareness for this space and time. 2020 is a very different time than it was in the 1980s when I was growing up. And we have to be in this place rather than say, you need to do what I did.
Beautiful. Yes, I think that's exactly right. And, I think, as I studied, my own journey and just, I've been doing therapy since I was 15. I'm 51, so there you go. But I have noticed sometimes swinging even the whole opposite way, which isn't super healthy either.
Right.
And I have had to call myself on that. And there was a time with my son, this is like, I don't know, 2 years ago, and we were sitting there, and I said, sweetie, I need to tell you that I think I'm being a little overprotective. And I said, and when I was a kid, I was not protected. And I said, but you know what? You're safe, you're safe, and I've always got your back. But so I said, so I just wanted you to know I see it, and I'm going to work on it. And then he was sitting there playing with Legos, and he looks up and he goes, well, Mama, do you think you might want to heal that? And I said, yes. And I said, in the beginning of healing it, as I wanted to admit it to you, because that way it's like, it's out. There's no secret. You know it. I know it. And I said, and if you see it, you have absolute permission to call me out, because I'm healing this. And I want you to have space to be you, to do what you need. And I've always got your back. And he goes, and I got it. So, but it was like, again, it was a real conversation to just say what was going on, because I was not protected at all. And now here he's growing up with all these safe adults, with all this great love and all the lessons he wants. And, and it was like, well, maybe I need to back up a little bit. So it's good awareness, and like you say, we're all in this together. We're all on this journey. So
we are. And, the two, just from what you said, like the two things we talk about a lot on the show is about the pendulum, about how sometimes we either move too close to how we were raised or too far away from how we were raised. Yeah. And similar to you, in my childhood, I didn't feel like I had permission to talk about my emotions. Yes. And sometimes I can overdo it with my kids about talking about emotions, and I have to notice that pendulum and, and how it swings. But I also want to compliment you on 2 stories that you've told that is, again, you do something rare, that we try to support each other or support ourselves and our clients and the people listening to the show about when you want to say something to your kid, just go right into it.
Oh, yeah.
Do you notice how parents sometimes beat around the bush if they want to talk about something like mental wellness or sexual education or, identity or whatever it may be. And we go around the block to try and, we'll try and be like, what are your friends doing? And one of the best things we can do, and it can be vulnerable, like we were talking about, but just go to it. I'm like, go to the middle of that conversation and step in, because you, in your own head, you think you're having a conversation. Your child may not even know what the heck you're talking about. So.
Right. Tell the truth, tell it quickly, and be in love. Exactly.
That's right.
Well, before we end our time together, I want you guys to talk a little bit about what you are offering parents through Zen Parenting Radio. I know you have a parenting, it's not called parenting support. Is it called Zen? I can't remember what it's called.
Team Zen. Yeah.
Team Zen. Yeah. So talk a little bit about that so our listeners are aware if they want to check out and tap in a little more to what you're doing.
The quickest way, just go to zenparentingradio.com. On there, we have something called Team Zen. I would say if you're not familiar with us, try the podcast out first. And if you like the podcast, then maybe you can take a look at this smaller community that we've created. A few other things I'm into is I co-founded a men's group called the Tribe Men's Group, and it's for anybody who identifies as a man to give and get support. So that's something that really kind of gets me inspired. What else do we do?
let's see. So we obviously the podcast, and we usually do a conference every year, a Zen Parenting conference in Chicago. Unfortunately, this year, due to the pandemic, it won't be shocking that we're not doing that. But we will get back to that hopefully in 2021. And I also have a book coming out next year in 2020, hopefully at the very end, called Zen Parenting. So my work right now is figuring out how to get everything we've talked about for 10 years into a book, which should be interesting. But as Todd said, zenparentingradio.com is the best place to find everything we offer, our podcast, and any, future events.
Yeah. And of course, we'll have links to all of this in our show notes. Just be sure to click on the show for September 28th, 2020, episode 118.
So definitely we want to thank Cathy and Todd for being with us. We appreciate the work you're doing. We love you. We bless you. We're lifting you up. And we know our listeners have probably learned a lot and gone even a little deeper. And in just thinking about these things. And what I always like to mention is, even if you're not a parent, if you're an aunt, if you're an uncle, I tell you, be one of those good ancestors, those good relatives that will become an ancestor that loved well and was able to support those kids around you, because it's so important for our kids to have a safe place, and we want to be the adults that make that happen. So
yeah, that's me and Shannon, because we've been married 26, 27 years, no kids, but Shannon's sister now has a couple of young boys, and starting to really sense that more than any of my other nieces or nephews, kind of reaching out to us. So, so I'm definitely diving in.
I know. Well, as you know, my own son reaches out to you. It's beautiful. Y'all have quite a connection.
Absolutely.
So anyway, Cathy and Todd, thank you so much. Thank you for the work you're doing on Zen Parenting Radio. And thank you, listeners, as always, for joining us today. We especially love when you share our show on social media, simply because it shares our message. So we honor you, we bless you, and we look forward to being with you next week. And please make sure and listen to all those shows during the week. Every day we've got those affirmations. We've got meditation on Friday, and we've got the new show that's happening on the weekend, along with Real Grief, Real Healing. So we bless you on the journey, dear friend, and thank you for joining us.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey, presented by Natural Awakenings Magazine, Zen Living Realty, and Supportek Staffing. This channel is also made possible through the continued support of our angel patrons, Aggie Payton, Anna Evans, Arlene Meyer, Diana Cox, Leslie Williams, Nora Miles, Sean Kilgore, Susanna Garcia, and Taryn Tucker. If you'd like to support the channel as a patron on an ongoing basis or through a one-time gift, head over to experienceofthesoul.com/support. The Authentic Spiritual Journey is copyright 2020, Cynthia Alice Anderson, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission from RR Hot Publishing. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.